You're listening to the ABC Music Talk podcast. In this episode, I get to talk about a subject which I think is crucial for us all to spend time thinking about. One which should trigger the question, how can I contribute? And that is sustainability. I've put it in the current affairs category because my guest in this episode is in the middle of rolling out a campaign which I think many in the music industry can relate to and need to think about, and that is the subject of frivolous flying, under the campaign title of Why Wing It? But first, a quick reminder about my sponsor, Rota. Rota is for artists, managers, labels, or anyone in the music industry who needs to create video content for promotion or monetization. Rota makes it fast, easy, and inexpensive to do all of that in one place. Head to www.abcmusic.co and click the Rota logo on the homepage to access a 10% off discount for the service. Now, my guest in this episode is a former music industry executive who managed to escape, or at least that's how I like to think about it. And he's now managing director of the enterprise division of the incredible company Hubbub. Welcome to the show, Alex Robinson.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's quite all right. So before we get into the Why Wing It campaign, Alex, who has the best first name ever, I believe, right? Isn't that the best club to be in?
It's right up there.
Every Alex is great. That's what I find. We first met when you were at the legendary label Stones Throw. Mm-hmm. Yes. So Aloe Blacc, MF Doom, and of course the wonderful Peanut Butter Wolf founder. Mm-hmm. So what is your background there? Because I know there's more to it than that. Because you had a job before that in the music industry.
I did. Yeah. So I went straight from university to a sales job at Vital, the independent distributor.
Oh wow!
So I was selling records to record shops at the point that all the record shops were closing.
Oh, good. Well, I started a vinyl label just at the point where vinyl was disappearing.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. So I think I was like the last expansion of the sales team before it started kind of shrinking. Then I moved down into the sort of dance specialist section of that company because I was like the hip hop expert, and then we were joined on with Pias, the record label group, and Pias did a deal with Stones Throw, the label in California, and I was a Stones Throw just obsessive.
As a lot of people were,
yeah. I mean, for years. So I couldn't believe that this office on the other side of the car park could get me access. I mean, my ambitions were really low. I was like, there are some stickers coming out with the J-Lib album that are only available in the US. there's a 7-inch which isn't, which I can't get unless I'm in like New York or LA. So I started hassling them, saying, can I help? Can I do anything to get hold of this stuff? And in the end, they said, well, there is something you can do. You can take a week's holiday from your job and drive Peanut Butter Wolf around the country to do DJ gigs as a kind of unpaid tour manager.
Lucky you.
Right? What a gig. But can you imagine, like, for me, that was just
of course,
the best experience I could imagine.
I guess a little bit like me, like I was just grateful for anything,
right?
Like any sort of sniff of being close to the music industry. There was like I felt like I struck gold.
Yeah. So despite the fact I must have been quite a sort of annoyingly enthusiastic kid at that point, I hit it off with Wolf and just sort of stayed in touch. And then there was Egon, who's the manager of Stones Throw at the time, and I started working with Pias, the record label. I went into one of the first label services companies, Integral at Pias, and I was still running Stones. I was running Stones Throw in the UK at that point, kind of. And then just got into this dialogue with them that there was so much more that we could do, and somehow persuaded them to let me set up a European headquarters for Stones Throw, which started off literally in the front room of one of my friends. She had a desk in her living room, basically. So. Yeah. We started like that, but then it really grew into a proper operation. The label was doing really well. We had great campaigns in France and Germany, and it just kept growing. So then I kind of had realised my life goal when I was in my mid-late.
And you were like, right,
20s.
So tick, what?
Right, what now? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't know that I had exactly that experience, but yeah, I started early, And yeah, it felt like I was sort of on this trajectory for a while, and then I definitely had moments of like, so what next? Like, this is I thought this would last for the rest of my life, and and you got to try and figure out the rest of it. Okay, so after Stones Throw,
so at Stones Throw we had this huge success with Aloe Black, which maybe people don't necessarily remember now, but at the time
come on, break into a rendition.
So we had this song called I Need $1.
Yeah.
And it just went crazy in Europe, so I was doing major label licensing deals in all the individual territories and sort of holding on to France where we were doing best.
Were you doing the sync licensing? Because it was very popular that way as well.
It did quite well with sync, maybe not as well as we expected, but it started with sync. It started with an HBO show. And so I realised there was this huge potential, but Stones Throw is quite a quirky operation. It remains as such, and it wasn't gonna grow. You know, the records we followed up Aloe Black with were as weird as ever. So what I did was I thought, well, I can do what I'm doing for them for other people. So I set up a label services company called The Other Hand, and I brought on a bunch of other American record labels who were in this spot where they were big enough that they had loads of stuff going on outside the US, but they weren't so big that they necessarily wanted a standalone office or offices outside.
Who were some of the other labels?
So Daptone, it's Sharon Jones, Charles Bradley, all of that stuff. Rhymesayers, the independent hip hop label, big touring operation particularly. I worked with Decon, that is now Mass Appeal. Now Again, which was the Stones Throw offshoot that went independent, lots of soul and jazz and stuff. And I did one-off campaigns for US labels and had a few others as well. And we were different in a way because what we did was we actually represented a label in Europe rather than just plug them into some distribution and marketing services and they were just like another bit of catalogue. So we sort of went out as Daptone and got involved in all of their business, even if it wasn't revenue raising. So, you know, if the key artists aren't within town, we might show around the sights of London, you know. It was like you would do if you were a record label.
Yeah, sure.
You know?
I like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was a small part of it. But, so I did that for 3 years.
Right.
And it worked well, grew nicely. I sort of stumbled into this time when label services was like the hot thing.
It was one of those things that I think people didn't realise they needed until somebody went, oh, there's a company that will take care of all the things that you don't do very well.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that sounds good. Oh, wonderful. Let's just have some more of that. Because it's kind of, instead of like having to hire internally and like build your own team and take on those, you know, full-time employment costs, which are hard for small businesses, to sort of just outsource all of that, project by project, and therefore often budget by budget, right?
And I think as well that distributors saw that there were projects that just weren't reaching their potential because the label didn't have the resource in that territory to make the most of it. So you could, you know, when there was momentum, you could kind of pick something up. So I did that for 3 years. It went really well, grew each year, you know, but I started getting both bored and a bit cynical.
I've never heard that from anyone in the music industry. So the cynicism,
So I was both optimistic and kind of ideological.
Right.
So I had this tension. I didn't want to work on mainstream music, not just because I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if I'm going to work on something I don't like, I'm not going to work in the music industry because you've got all these other problems as well. But the music I like, as I get older, is getting maybe less and less commercially viable, just because the way my tastes were kind of progressing. And I was getting older, and it's hard on your 80th campaign
to be excited.
To be as excited. But of course for the artist, and often their management, that's the most important thing they've ever done. And they believe it could be massive, but they want you to believe that, and they know when you don't. And so I found myself, I'm not great at convincing people when I don't believe in something. So So I just found myself kind of falling out of love with it. Yeah.
And it is. I think it is a career where you kind of need to retain that. You do, because it's kind of to your point. Like everybody else that you'll come across is in love with what they're doing.
You know, I think there's a couple of paths, because I've got friends who reached the end of, like, in their 20s, and they just made the decision, look, I'm just going to treat this as business. And they're working on stuff that they don't like,
right?
But they're focusing on doing a good job, being a professional, you know, progressing their career in an industry that they know,
right?
And with music that they kind of get, but it's not stuff they're going to be putting on at home.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Well, I mean, there's definitely a realisation as you get older that the music that you're often peddling is music for the youth, and you're not the youth anymore, and therefore it doesn't really relate to your life. Everything from sort of like the imagery and the kind of the stuff that goes onto it. It's one of those things. I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before. I had the VP of creative marketing at Empire. He talks about a lot, like when he's designing campaigns, you have to kind of understand the audience that it's going into. Otherwise, you know, you're going to miss. It's not going to look right. It's not going to feel right, or it's going to feel disingenuous. And so, you do have to kind of still be immersed in it. And as you get older, it gets harder. Your priorities change.
Right, and I think that was a key insight for me. Kind of had two parts. One was, in general, I don't want to be a middle-aged man chasing youth trends, because I could see them around me, and it's not a good look.
Yeah. And
the other thing was,
some people pull it off.
Some people pull it off.
Some people they just kind of bleed that stuff, but some people it just feels slightly disingenuous.
Right, and there are people who just retain this like constant enthusiasm and fascination for what's happening. But I looked around thinking, well, who can I see who's like me, but 15, 20 years older, and that they're happy, and they've built an interesting career, and they've increased their skills and so on. I found very few examples. And I think when I really stopped and thought about it, I was like, well, what are the chances of me bucking that trend?
Yeah. No, fair enough. I mean, it's. I think a lot of this. I've talked a little bit about this on another podcast, which isn't aired yet, but sort of that around sort of mental health and. I think you've got to like understand who you are a little bit and be true to yourself. Otherwise, you're just going to wind up in a whole world of pain, just generally, just day to day.
Right.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. And so then the other hand, how did you get out of that?
So, I sold it to a distributor.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was not the type of deal that would, get in the news.
Just not like the IPOs that are going on with the major record companies. No. Different set of numbers.
Yeah, different set of much smaller numbers.
Yeah.
But it was enough to give me some freedom to just take a pause, which is what I needed.
Right.
Because I found it very hard to think about what I wanted to do next when I was in I ran a label services company. I ran my own little label. Yeah. I managed a couple of artists. I did a radio show. I was doing like going to clubs and whatever at the weekends. My life, my work, my hobbies, it was all revolved around a pretty, I'd meet people in the music industry who would have no idea about any of the things I did because, I was like this little outpost on the edge of the music industry,
Right.
So I found it really hard when I was in it to really get my head out. So I just took some time to just stop.
Yeah.
And like try to learn how to relax again.
Yeah, that's important.
Get back on track and did some travelling and thought about what I wanted to do next. And so I was really fortunate to be able to
have that moment.
To do that. And that's because I'd run my own company, so I had a kind of pot that I was able to use to do that. And that was able to kind of break me out of the cycle of like the pressure for the next thing.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, and so then I decided I wanted to kind of carry on using my commercial skills, and I still wanted to do something I believed in, but I wanted it to be socially useful.
Right. So that that piece of it.
Yeah.
Where had that come from? Was that something that you had always been there and you just never really like focused on before, or?
It was always there.
Yeah.
This is where I go back to me being kind of ideologically driven. You know, I had this, looking back, kind of quite naive view that supporting this independent music industry was promoting like really valuable culture. Right. I was looking at what I was doing and tying it back to the civil rights protest movement of the 60s that I was and remain interested in. So
had you studied that at the college or something?
I did history at university. I did a lot of American history, and I wrote my dissertation was on post-slavery US contrasting the North and South. So I had this sort of semi-academic, background.
Yeah.
So I knew that I had to do something. I believed it. I couldn't just turn up for work and kind of do 8 hours and go home. Sure. So that was true in music, and it needed to be part of the next thing as well. But my horizons had broadened in that time, and I was beginning to be more and more interested in the environmental sector, but also in like what social enterprise was and what it could mean and what the future of it could be. Right. And I ended up joining a scheme called On Purpose, which is just the most incredible thing, where they take people 5-10 years into their career, mainly bankers, lawyers, accountants, civil servants, people like that, who just did the obvious thing after university and then looked around a few years later and was what that wasn't what I meant to do, right?
Yeah, right.
And then you get paid, if you join the scheme, if you get in, you get paid enough to live on. Right. And they train you a bit like a kind of MBA in socially purposeful business.
Wow. And how's that funded?
It's funded because you spend 4.5 days a week in a social enterprise working for them.
Oh, okay.
So the social enterprise gets some highly qualified professional who doesn't know anything about the sector for cheap.
Yeah, right.
And you get the experience of working in that environment, in that world, and then you get all this training, and it's everything from accounting to storytelling. Yeah. That was a year, and it just changed my life.
I'm sure. That sounds incredible. And what was that called again?
It's called On Purpose.
On Purpose. It's still going now?
Very strong. They're in Paris and Berlin, as well as London now, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's a CEO program too.
And how did you find it?
Through the friends of friends.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Word of mouth marketing, right. As we know from the music industry.
And in the end, my wife kind of put it in front of me. She was like, "Alex, you need to look at this."
Right.
And I was like, "Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Actually, this looks exactly like the sort of thing I need. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah. That's really, really interesting. Okay, and so at what point did you sort of, I guess, finish that and then find yourself in your current spot?
So I finished that in April 2017.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's a year long, and I went straight from that to Hubbub.
Amazing.
Which is my current spot.
So just introduce Hubbub real quick. I will put like links in the show notes and things like that. But just for the purposes of this.
So Hubbub is an environmental charity and social enterprise. It doesn't look like what you're imagining when you hear that phrase.
I want to talk about that later on, but carry on. Yeah.
So we're set up. It has a look and feel more like a creative agency. We're set up to do mainstream campaigns, environmental campaigns, that reach people who aren't green, who don't necessarily care about those issues. We don't talk about sustainability. We don't really talk about technical things particularly. What we try and do is get people excited and enthusiastic about taking environmental action. So lots of our work might be about food, or it might be about fashion, and we don't necessarily explicitly prioritise the environmental impact. What we think is important is that people start living greener and healthier lives, and try and build momentum behind those things, and we do it with this very, we have graphic designers in-house. We try and make everything that we do look as good as what you're bombarded with commercially all day long, because that's what you're competing with for people's attention. Because I the reason why we're doing this interview in part is because I've sort of watched your
career via, as I mentioned earlier, through LinkedIn, and just kind of, I am absolutely mesmerised by anyone who can escape the music industry and find something fulfilling to do after it. And actually, and I've said this to a few people for years, you know, the only other kind of thing I've ever really been interested in, mainly because I'm a bit of a nerd, a bit of a geek, is renewable energy.
Right.
You know, I'm quite fascinated by kind of, you know, hydroelectric and solar and the rest of it. You know, I guess it just sort of struck a chord with me. And I think it's worth mentioning at this point, one of the things I didn't realise until I actually started to research this, kind of to your point about people don't necessarily know. I mean, you guys are, you know, heavily involved in this whole Starbucks campaign. That is it just in London at the moment? The 5p.
No, sorry, it's UK wide.
It's UK wide.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anytime anyone buys a cup of coffee from Starbucks in a paper cup, they don't bring their reusable cup. Starbucks charges an extra 5p. Yeah,
as opposed to saving 25p, which is the reusable thing. Yeah.
So you can't actually pay the correct price in Starbucks. It's impossible. And that 5p comes to us, and we run campaigns that reduce plastic pollution, that increase the viability and availability of coffee cup recycling, that drive a culture of reuse and refill. Yeah. So we're trying to get those rates up. We're doing a lot of work on that at the moment. Yeah. And we've been working with them for quite a while now. It's an ongoing partnership.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, the sort of psychology behind why you've done it that way. Because I think am I right in saying that Starbucks had originally had the save 25p if you use a recyclable cup, but that wasn't working as well as the point where they at the till they say, okay, we're gonna have to put a bit of money on this. You know, and it seems to work better that way around, because you're asking somebody for something rather than just sort of going, oh, you can save a bit.
Yeah, it does. So it's based on a like behavioural psychology concept called loss aversion.
Loss aversion, there you go.
And the idea is that people are much, much less willing to lose something they've got than to gain something. So the famous study involves giving people a mug.
Right.
And if you give like one group of people a mug and another group you don't, and then the people you don't give a mug to, you say, how much would you pay for your mug? And they say, I don't know, £3. The people you have given a mug to, you say, how much would you sell your mug for? They'll say, oh, £7.
Wow.
Because just having it, somehow you attach yourself to it.
Yeah,
right?
true.
So this is playing with that idea on a small scale. Yeah.
I love that. That's excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's so clever. It's so simple, so clever. That was a campaign that I'd, you know, obviously come across because I do drink at Starbucks. Probably shouldn't, but I do. And I had no idea that was, you know, that was you guys. So it's fascinating. What a brilliant way of kind of being able to fund some of your other things.
Yeah, it's definitely made a big difference for sure.
So let's now talk about the Why Wing It campaign. I know you're working on lots of different things, you know, we can talk just generally about it. Perhaps first of all, can you just give a very high level kind of what it's focused on, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the other bits of it.
Sure.
Together.
So Why Wing It is a campaign that aims at frivolous flying and raising,
which is not easy to say. I've got that written down as something I'm going to try and say later on, but frivolous, it's like a tongue twister.
So we don't say it out loud very often.
It's wise.
The idea behind the campaign is that there's lots of noise out there about reducing flying, and messages about not doing something, and particularly not doing something that people have lots of positive associations with, are really difficult, and they often don't work. And we're committed to not doing negative campaigns, so we kind of set ourselves this challenge: can we do a campaign that can have an impact on flying and find positive ways of framing it? So one of the other things we know is that doing very general campaigns don't work.
Right.
So you don't talk about food waste, you talk about bananas.
Okay. Right.
Because that's something tangible people can kind of get and do something about and understand.
Which kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about how the whole presentation of Hubbub is not like, this is, you know, we're sort of green warriors and, you know, like you try and avoid that type of language.
Exactly. Yeah. So our bananas work is called Banana Drama.
Banana Drama. I think you guys have a little bit too much fun coming up with this stuff.
And we do Pumpkin Rescue is a big thing now for us. We do it at Halloween. So with flying, we were looking at what's the really pointless flying that people actually don't really like doing that we can use to generate a conversation around this. And through our research, we looked into stags and hen do's from the UK.
Yeah.
Because it turns out that a really significant proportion of the travel that young people do is taking flights for stags and hens.
Yeah, which it's fascinating to me because we'll talk about this a little bit later. But flying to me means something completely different because of the work that I do. But yeah, I was really surprised to sort of see that actually was one of the most that was one of the biggest reasons why people were taking flights outside of kind of like the annual holiday.
Right. I think we forget that less than half of the people in the UK will take a flight in a given year.
Yeah. Just feels weird.
And the most frequent flyers, I think the top 15%, take about 70% of all the flights.
Yep, something we'll talk about in a minute.
So, there's a really interesting, I think, mismatch between the message that you'll get in the media, where any campaign that talks about flying, it doesn't pass the Daily Mail test because the headline will be, charity or government wants to ruin your holiday.
Yeah.
It's not the single holidays.
Yeah.
It's the people flying to their holiday home. 20 flights a year. It's the people who travel all the time for work and leisure. That's the vast majority of it. Most people aren't really flying, or they're having their one holiday a year.
Yeah.
So, but one of the interesting things about the stag and hen do thing is that so we did a lot of polling around this. People don't want to do it. They actually don't want. They don't want to go to Barcelona on the stag do.
Well, it's often one I obviously I'm in that sort of target age thing, although a little bit past it now of the study, and I definitely experienced that in groups that I've been involved with, where you often have a group of people from different sort of economic backgrounds, should we say, and some people to take that trip to wherever, it's kind of whatever, it's not a problem, it's fine. But sometimes there's those that have got kids, or they don't earn that much money, and and it's actually like, I've got to take a whole weekend to go drinking or whatever. It's not really what I want to do.
And also, if you do 4 in a year,
true.
It adds up. So I think we found that a third of people actively resented the bride or groom.
Wow.
for making them do it,
which is crazy because it's turning something that's ultimately quite positive,
right,
into something that's like,
yeah. But it's become kind of cultural, and part of it is to do with cheap flights and so on. But still, if you go abroad, on average, you're going to be spending significantly more. I think we found £600 and something pounds to £400 and something pounds.
Yeah.
So
and these are all relatable things. That's one of the things I really like about the way the campaign's put together. Like, the people will sit there and listen to it because they go, I understand this. This means something to me. I've experienced this myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and I think it's a way in. It's a way into talking about the flying conversation, which is it's increasingly important.
Yeah.
And it's a really hard one because there isn't, like, with this campaign, what we're talking about is the brilliant things you can do in the UK, why people prefer it, all the advantages there are of the kind of staycation.
Yeah.
And we're signposting people ways of having like a great experience in the UK.
Yeah.
Both to help people design those stag and hen do's, but also to almost, you don't want there to be a stigma where, like, if you do it in the UK, it's somehow less of a event.
Yeah. Well, because it's often for people, it's a big moment in their lives, right? And actually, I have people from all over the world listening to this podcast, which is utterly mental. Now, I know there are like countries like Indonesia, they do have the concept of stag and hen do's, obviously UK, US, but just for those that perhaps what these guys talking about, stag and hen do's. So just to explain, they are a moment before marriage occurs, where boys and girls, typically that's how it's split, break off and go and do something as a sort of last hurrah before they sort of like get settled down and get hitched, as we say. So that's what they are. That's what we're talking about here. Sort of mini holidays, aren't they?
That's right. And so I think we found out that just under half of all flights taken by men from 20 to 45 last year were for stag do's, which is crazy.
Which is crazy.
So and as airports are trying to expand, and people are forecast to be flying more and more over the next few years. Most people in the world have never flown, right? So you've got huge populations which are becoming more affluent, which might start flying. Like, we need to stop. To really slow down. The airline industry can't decarbonise because if you build a plane now, it's going to be in the air for 25 years or something. Right? Technology is not really improved for decades, and it's not looking like it's going to improve significantly enough.
I was going to say significantly, because the newer planes are like Norwegian make a big sort of fuss about the fact that they burn less fuel and they get there faster and all the rest of it, but I don't know that it's a significant change.
It's both insignificant, but also whenever the airline industry has made like efficiency savings in the past, it trades it off by making bigger planes. And then there's these pie in the sky technologies, right? So yes, there have been solar powered flights that might take up some very tiny, small, local niche flights in the future. Yes, people are talking about hydrogen powered planes. If that becomes the fuel of the future, there may not be that much for planes anyway, but we're talking it's too late. We need to cut our emissions now, not in 2045, in 25 years' time. So it's an unusual campaign for us because normally we're much more about getting people to take measurable action and really focusing on something super positive. This is us trying to take what is a sort of negative messaging around there and looking at the positive things, and we're supporting another charity called Possible, a rare collaboration in the charity sector. It's like music, it's weirdly competitive.
It's slightly weird, isn't it?
It's sort of sad, isn't it? Yeah. So they have a scheme called Climate Perks, which, if anyone's listening and they are in charge of their employment policies or knows the person who is, it's a scheme whereby if an employee takes a train to their holiday destination and it takes significantly longer, then you get an extra day's holiday as a result. So we have signed up for that, up to 2 a year.
Right, okay.
To reward people taking sort of slow travel, low carbon holidays.
Yeah, okay. Very cool. Yeah, I think that sounds familiar because I think I was going to talk about the podcast that the company does. I think it was, I don't know if it was exactly mentioned that way. It was more like an idea at the time because I think it was a podcast from a little while ago.
Right.
Maybe series 1, maybe 2, not sure.
Yeah, it is live now, so if you Google Climate Perks.
Okay.
Yeah, you will find it.
Very good. I like the idea of it, and it's funny actually. I talk a little bit about kind of some of my issues around this, but I've noticed like with conferences like Amsterdam Dance Event, there were a bunch of people that were taking the train instead of getting the plane, which is longer, it's more expensive, but they were quite actively kind of being like, I took the train and telling people about it. People go, oh really, what was that like? The sort of moment of discovery, really. It was a train, I don't know, they've been around for a while. But yeah, and they still work apparently, trains.
Well, especially once you get into continental Europe, it can be wonderful.
Yeah.
I went to a conference in Germany by train the other day, and I think that it took me about an extra hour and a half in total. I had a far better experience.
Absolutely.
I got much more work done.
I mean, if you're going to somewhere like Paris from London, the train is the best way of doing it because it's not just like the speed of it, because it is quicker, but it's quicker because you don't have all the airport bits, and the airport bit is it's miserable. Yeah. It's miserable, like that whole and you've got to take your shoes off and your belt off, and we'll take everything off, and then walk through the metal detector and still get frisked. Yeah. It's like. And the walking and the bit that airports.
They're unsettling places.
They are unsettling. I have a sort of love-hate relationship with them. There's a sort of moment of excitement, but they're also like not great places to be sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But but it can just take a lot longer. And also then when you arrive in France, the airport's nowhere near the centre of Paris,
mm-hmm.
whereas the train just drops you straight
mm-hmm.
in. Yeah, no, I think people should spend a bit more time looking at those things, because it is just too easy. It's like, well, I've got the EasyJet app or whatever budget airline on my phone, I'll just do that.
Yeah, and there are websites out there that help you plan your journeys between places, like
mm-hmm.
Rome to Rio, for example, will
mm-hmm.
help you figure out the best ways to get places, all your options, what the train links are, and so on. So it's out there if you look for it, for sure.
Absolutely. One of the other things I liked about the campaign was not just this kind of awareness of potentially how much money you could save,
mm-hmm.
which I guess if you're doing, one of these stag or hen parties, money's an issue because it's often not just getting there and meeting up with people. There's people who are organising events, they're doing paintballing or go-karting
mm-hmm.
or whatever. Like, there's sometimes something that they sort of
mm-hmm.
lean on.
Mm-hmm.
So money's always an issue because
mm-hmm.
there's so many things to pay for just to achieve this
mm-hmm.
momentous occasion
mm-hmm.
in somebody's
mm-hmm.
life. And so, but one of the other things that I liked about it was the kind of the link back to other things that people might be doing from a sustainability point of view that, or at least that they're conscious of. Like it sort of says, well, if you don't do these flights, it's a bit like somebody not driving for however long it is,
right?
Years, I think it is in the study, and then also some like. By not taking these flights, it's like somebody being vegan for like a couple of years, right? It's like...
Yeah, so I think if a group of 10 flies from Brighton, from London to Barcelona,
right.
instead of going out to Brighton on the train or something, then those emissions are the same as one person from the group going vegan for well over 2 years.
Yeah.
And I think what we're just trying to tap into, and it's a really interesting topic that we have not solved yet, is... there's all this messaging about what you can do that's sustainable, right? You can't see me doing air quotes on the podcast.
No,
air quotes for sustainable.
Alex is actually doing air quotes. Yeah, that's amazing. Because sometimes I say I'm not doing quotation marks, and I'm not. I'm genuinely not, but I kind of feel like I should say that. Yeah. Okay, but so, you actually did it, which is great. That might be on the camera.
But what we're not so educated about is actually what really makes a difference. So, I have had, I won't name and shame,
mm-hmm.
people say to me with a pretty much straight face, I fly every week, but I've got an amazing bamboo toothbrush.
I mean, I have to say, I had a phrase in here and I was like, something like, it's highlighting, the other things that we need to do, more than just sort of, shop in a particular aisle at the supermarket.
Right. So,
because it's kind of fashionable, some of that stuff in certain communities.
Right, so there's a kind of virtue signalling associated. This is why nowadays in every meeting, everyone takes out their nice water bottle or their nice reusable cup.
Right.
Which, 5-10 years ago didn't happen. So I think that all of these changes are to be encouraged.
Right.
So I don't mean to laugh at the bamboo toothbrush change, but what it is a question of materiality. Like, what actually makes a difference, and what is kind of window dressing. And if it's window dressing, that's fine as long as you know that
on its own,
that on its own is not much.
Yeah.
And when you look at the research of what people kind of understand, there are things that they really underestimate the impact of. Flying is one, and things that they overestimate the impact of. So it's really important, I think, over the next few years to help people realise that simple things like switching to renewable energy, it might take you 10 minutes. It's a really simple thing. Can have a really big impact.
Yeah.
If you can afford it, or let's say the government brings in some funding to help make this happen.
If only.
We need to increase the energy efficiency of our homes.
Yeah.
That will make a huge impact. But there's lots of other things that I think we're kind of taught make a bit of a difference, and they're quite small things. So, it's good to do your recycling, for example. We do lots of work around that. And also I think it's one of those sort of it's like a kind of gateway drug. It makes you.
That's a good way of
It makes you feel like you're responsible and you're doing the right thing, and
some of it's forced upon you these days, right?
Yeah.
You know, which is great. Which is kind of. It feels like that should happen a bit more. Like these things should be forced upon you, and I know that that's happening around sort of cars. You know, you won't be able to make gasoline cars in a certain period of time, like new ones. But of course, then, as you mentioned earlier about the planes, you've still got this kind of 25-year, you know, moment of switchover that's going to happen after that. So even though that date in the future of, you know, manufacturers are no longer going to be able to produce gasoline cars, it's then extended way beyond that for the actual reality to hit.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, I mentioned the podcast earlier, which is called What on Earth. I thoroughly recommend it, not only because I'm a fan of podcasts, and I guess anyone listening to this presumably also listens to other podcasts. Who knows? Maybe it's just mine. Maybe mine's just the best podcast ever. It's not true. But it's a great medium for like kind of learning about a range of subjects, because it's based on a series and they're quite short. They are way more professional than what I do. You actually edit them. They've got like music and bits and, you know, fun things. But I really like the fact that it's not preachy, you know, because there is a moment of kind of, whenever I think anyone thinks about these kind of, you know, areas, if they're not actively involved in it, they're like, oh, you know, like just somebody telling me I can't do stuff. But the way that they're phrased is just genius, because it's often like, if you do this, your life will be better. You will have more fun. You will enjoy things, you know, and it's just phrased like that. And so there's that. Certainly, as a listener, it was like kind of, oh, that makes so much more sense. Why am I not doing that? Like I'm bonkers crazy not doing that. And I just think I think it's really, really good. And one of them covered flying. So I felt like research, you know, before doing this campaign. And you mentioned a little bit about this earlier, and I have to say I had I learned a lot of stuff, but also learned something about myself, which is apparently I'm in the top percentile of people that are considered frequent flyers, which, when I think about it, is crazy, because amongst the people that I spend time with, I don't fly anywhere near as much as they do. So just to kind of give the listeners a little bit of background, and I recommend you go and listen to the What on Earth podcast, because and then perhaps listen to the flying one as a sort of follow up to this. But the suggestion is that people should be taking no more than 2 flights a year. That's and anyone that takes 3 flights or more, and we're talking about return flights, we're not talking about individual legs of something. But so return flights. But if you take you know, 3 or more, then you're in a bracket of kind of frequent flyers. And the people that are in the top percentile of that take 7 or more a year. 7 or more a year. Okay, I went back and looked at my social feed, where I often just kind of post just where I'm going, just to sort of friends and family know that I'm out of country. I did over 20 last year, and I think it's actually close to 30, because some of them I didn't put on my social timeline. They're just the ones that and so that's a mixture of a lot of long haul stuff that I'm doing almost always for work, but then there's a lot of kind of like short European stuff for conferences and things like that. So I feel terrible, but I'll be honest with you, but I'd never really thought about it like that before. Like, not really, like, as in, because I hang around with people that, as I say, do far more flying than I do. Especially Americans, you know, they'll fly all the time in America because it's such a huge land mass, and you know, there's often a connection between East and West Coast or whatever, right? So that I feel like they're always on a plane, and so that, I mean, that was a real eye opener to me, I have to say. So I guess the kind of like my question to you is, for people that are in that bracket, that aren't just doing it because there's a holiday home that they just jet to every now and again. The face-to-face concept of what I do in the work that I do, I think is really important. There's no way I could have built the relationships that I have that have allowed the various companies that I've worked with and represented to succeed or achieve certain goals or whatever. There's no way that would have happened unless I'd taken those certain flights to go and see, meet, shake hands, spend time with, and all the rest of it. I mean, is there anything that we can do about that sort of thing? I know we've got video conferencing, but it's not the same, is it?
So, this is a tricky subject for sure, because there isn't a substitute for face-to-face meetings. And we are very careful not to put all the burden on individuals, right? It's not, if the way that we think about behaviour change, there are things that we can do to make things appealing for you to make a different choice, right? But on the other side, you've got, well, what are the systems and infrastructure that you are part of? You know, what's the culture and the possibilities there for you. So I think you've got a carrot and stick with this. On one hand, clearly we need to have more investment in better video conferencing technology and ways of doing
it. Because it is rubbish. It's the bane of my life. I spend a lot of time on video conference calls and I dislike them intensely. Right. I'll turn the camera off most of the time.
And I don't know if you've been to any big corporates that have these rooms that have like a giant screen, and it's almost, they're getting better, but you have to be in Deloitte to do it.
I tell you the thing, my biggest hang up about it, right? And I'm on regular conference calls every single week with the various companies that I work with, and there is almost always, in fact always, every single time, I don't think there's a single one that I've been on where you've got a group of, say, 4 or more people that you're talking to in a room. You can visibly see when they've all switched off and they're not listening, and they're on their phones, they're doing emails, they're just, talking to somebody on the side, clearly not listening. Whereas I know if I was in that room with them, that wouldn't occur. Yeah. That wouldn't happen.
Yeah. So video conferencing is not the be all and end all.
Agreed.
So there also has to be investment in infrastructure for train journeys where that's possible.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I really like this kind of extra day thing, because it's kind of not directly a money thing. It's kind of a money thing. Kind of a money thing, but hopefully it's a soft one. It's not like somebody's got to give you something necessarily.
Also, it encourages people to try it. Yeah. You do it, and you realise actually you prefer it.
And you know what? Like, the trains these days, Wi-Fi. I mean, certainly in Europe at the moment. I know we're so apparently exiting Europe. Nonsense, but personal opinion, of course. But you can do work on a train. You can't really do that work, right, on a plane, because you have to turn it off. Yeah. Whereas sometimes there's Wi-Fi and things like that, but it's never very good, is it? So so if it's your employer saying, take an extra day to get yourself to your destination, but it's not like you can have to necessarily switch off or like put your out of office on, right?
And I think as well, if you listen to our podcast on this, and Leo from Possible will be talking about his proposal, which is that as people fly more, then there should be a kind of gradual increase on the tax on flying. Right now, there's no duty on fuel on planes at all, so flying is being more or less subsidised, which is pretty crazy. And then that would mean that your first couple of flights might be free. Your third one, you're starting to pay a bit more. It keeps ratcheting up the more and more you fly. So if you really need to be somewhere and you're doing important work and it's of great value to you, you would still choose to take that flight, even if it's a bit more expensive, a lot more expensive. But what you can't do is take your 12th highly subsidised flight to New York just because.
Right.
Or you might think twice about whether you really, really need to do that. And that's not ideal, because the ideal would be we could all fly as much as we wanted for next to nothing all the time. Yeah. But we're in a climate emergency, and that one way or another, that's not going to happen. So better that we think about it now and start investing in the solutions than come up against the really brutal reality of it sooner rather than later. Yeah. And then, our flying habits might be the least of our worries.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely like the sort of severe side of this whole dialogue, isn't it? I think people do exactly what I've just done and kind of think about the immediacy. Like, how would that impact me right now with the way that I conduct myself on this planet? But I think we've never got to lose sight of the fact that the reason why we're doing it is because we left it too late. Right. I mean, you and I grew up roughly the same age, right? And it was being talked about throughout my entire life. The emergency that we've got. I mean, I think it's kind of mental that we've sort of got ourselves into the state that we have. But of course, people are very short-sighted often on these things. So, because I mean, what you were just talking about there, this sort of like idea of sort of mirroring taxation and kind of thinking about sort of a graduated response to it to allow people to do a sort of a reasonable amount, because if we all did everything in moderation, it'd be much better. But we don't. We often do things through excess. I just wonder, like, whether is it as simple as just kind of looking at your sort of your average person, which is kind of where your study for the campaign looks at, which is the reason why people fly is because of stag and hen do's. That's not the reason why I fly.
No.
And so like, is it as simple as the way it was kind of explained on that, where you've kind of got, the first one's for free or like, without tax, second one, small amount of tax, third one and so on have the sort of, the difference between like our say 20% and 40% tax brackets we have in the UK, right? Just wondering whether there could be kind of special, allowances to ease people into that, perhaps. Like like if it's a business trip and you've got to kind of like say it's a business trip in the same way, like if you spend money and you go down the pub with your mates, that's social spending. But if you're going down with a business person for a business meeting, it's taxed in a different way, right?
So I should be clear that this is not Habub's
policy. No, I'm not currently campaigning for this.
I'm mentioning another charity's policy, so you should probably get into those details with them.
Yeah, sure. Them. That's fair. I apologise, but it was just it just got me thinking about like how do we solve for this? Like personally, I was thinking how could as somebody who's often the manager of a team of people, how can I make this better? How can I improve this, or at least just monitor it better? I'm trying to think back at some of the flights that I took, and I'm wondering, were they all absolutely essential? Don't know. I mean, I think a lot of them were, genuinely. But it's difficult, isn't it? So in the What on Earth podcast, as just said, we talked about flying. Now, I listened to something else that a former guest on the show, Cliff Fluett, was talking about. I saw him this week, and he said, "Oh, you should go and listen to the Elon Musk interview with Joe on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast." And there was a moment that obviously Tesla, electric, and there was a thing that was covered on the What on Earth podcast about electric planes, and they talk about kind of the problem with electric planes is that there's short distances, they're not currently able to do long haul flights and things like that. And there was just a moment where Elon Musk said, no one really needs electric planes right now. That's not the problem. The problem is surface level transport. And now, obviously, he's probably going to say that because he's the manufacturer of like electric cars, right? Yeah. Also, I have a feeling, just to sort of defend him slightly there, is I don't think he was talking about the environment. I think he was talking about congestion and things like that as much as anything else. Because basically Joe Rogan had said, "Have you got any other ideas for inventions?" And he said, I've had this design for an electric plane that has a vertical takeoff, so it kind of like a bit like a Harrier jump jet, kind of shoots up in the air and then takes off from there. Because they talk about the impracticality of flying cars and things like this. Right. But I mean, I guess I don't know whether you necessarily even have an opinion on that, but it was just interesting to sort of hear this person who's considered a thought leader and just sort of going, electric planes, we don't really need those. That's not going to solve the problem. But yeah, I
wonder what problem he was referring to, because as a share of global emissions, flying is growing fast.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think that was the bit that I was kind of stuck on a little bit, because obviously in your study you talk about in comparison with driving a car, for example, which felt like a direct relationship, and he was sort of going, but electric planes, no one needs them right now. What we need to solve is the electric car issue. And I don't know. I wonder, like, how accurate is some of this stuff?
Well, so I'm not an expert on the kind of macro level stuff.
Yeah.
But clearly we all are using cars far more than planes, owning them often, so our purchasing choices are important.
Yeah.
And it's going to use, right now it's using a huge amount of oil, it's going to use a huge amount of electricity as well if we transition to electric cars.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's probably right that it's a more pressing thing to solve, but we've got to solve both of them.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and just sort of, it's worth mentioning that was a podcast from about a year and a half ago, and these things seem to be moving quicker in terms of people's sort of reaction to them. But yeah, okay, very good. So coming towards the end, because we are close to an hour, and as I mentioned before, I never edit these, so this is going to be as long as it is. But you worked in the music industry before, and so therefore you're probably in a fairly unique position given the work that you're doing at the moment. What else could the music industry kind of like do, just in general, around sort of sustainability? I mean, have you seen any other projects that have worked for perhaps other industries that the music industry could adopt?
That's interesting.
I mean, we have, I guess we've kind of kicked the habit of CDs to a certain degree. I remember I did my university dissertation in part on the kind of waste that went on.
Mm-hmm.
The Sony at the time had a mechanical crusher in the basement because they continually over manufactured for promo.
Mm-hmm.
So there were just all these CDs just kind of just getting crushed and dumped to presumably landfill, and all they needed to do was just reevaluate how many they needed to make, but no one was doing that. No one was thinking of that. They were just spending budget.
Yeah, and they were cheap to make.
And they were cheap to make. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's a complicated one because the impact of streaming is far higher than people realise, possibly higher than physical formats.
Right, let's talk about this.
So, greening the internet is one of those projects that it's going to take a while to break through to kind of public awareness.
Yeah.
That, there's a statistic which I don't have at my fingertips about the percentage of energy in America, of electricity, domestic electricity in America, that is used by Netflix. And it's vast,
Right.
sort of.
Wow.
And so we don't realise that our use of Spotify and YouTube and so on, that energy is coming from somewhere. There's huge servers, they're not all using green energy.
Yeah.
And they're ongoing rather than the kind of one and done nature of pressing a CD, which is, a relatively innocuous product. I have a collection of vinyl downstairs. This is an oil-based product, so I have this weird thing where I have a hobby that's kind of
it's damaging to the environment.
I try to only buy second-hand records these days.
Well, that's one way of doing it, but also I think people, if they're fans of music and they're buying vinyl, therefore it's something they keep. It's not as like the CD just often became a coaster and then it got thrown away, right? Because it got scratched or whatever. Vinyl, I think people are a bit more careful with, and tend to keep.
Yeah, that's true. So
I'm just trying to make you feel better, Alex.
Thanks.
That's
right.
right.
So there's going to be. This is not specific to the music industry, but digital consumption of energy through these kind of platforms is definitely going to become an issue that people talk about more, and that those companies, that the Netflixes, Spotify's, and so on, are going to have to reckon with a bit. Another obvious one in the music industry is travel, and it's not just executive travel. Yeah, it's like festival culture. It's touring, and I know that people are looking into that. There's another charity called Julie's Bicycle that works with the Arts Council that do lots of consultancy work with festivals, helping them think about their best practice in terms of like having minimal impact. Yeah. And then you've also got, I made so many T-shirts in my music industry.
Well, there's a cotton episode on your podcast, isn't there? Yeah.
So I've been out of the music industry for a while now, but the amount of merch we made that was designed for, often it was really low quality, and that was something that I tried to push back on. Yeah. And it was just so short term. Yeah. So I don't know if that is still true, that there's just still basically loads of promotional crap floating around. But that's something that I think needs to be rethought as well.
Well, I think I may be misquoting this, and I forget the band, maybe it was 1975, I like to think that it was, because I know the manager, where they were kind of rebadging old merch, so people could turn up at a show and kind of get like a piece of merch they bought before, have, I guess, something ironed on, stitched on, or something like that. Great. To kind of update it. Yeah. Which I thought was what a really simple way of doing something like that. Probably makes it cheaper for the customer. It's less manufacturing for the band. They don't have to like produce all these units to make the unit cost correct. Yeah. It's engaging. You feel involved. That's it's obviously socially conscious or environmentally conscious. Yeah.
And you don't have to lug it all around on your. Ship it from the States, lug it around. Lug it around on your tour bus.
There's often knock-on effects of these things, right? Yeah.
And I would be the one who, at the end of the tour,
would have to load it back into a van.
Yeah, or get back in touch with the hotel in Switzerland where we'd left 3 boxes of merch.
Can you bin it or ship it?
Try and get it back, all that stuff. So, so that's probably relatively small.
Sure.
In the great scheme of things.
Sure. But ultimately, all of these things have some sort of impact.
Yeah.
As long as we're aware that one thing that we do, this is your bamboo toothbrush thing.
Right.
As long as you don't just think, oh, well, I've done that now. Yeah. That's it. The planet's saved.
And there are bands who are stopping touring because for environmental reasons. Obviously, that's a privilege if you're able to do that.
Yeah, because that came up recently, didn't it? And there was a little bit of a backlash there because it was a bit like, well, of course you cannot tour. You don't need to tour. You've already done all of that.
But also, so that's true. But there's loads of touring that happens in the start of an artist's career that is also pretty pointless.
Right.
So, anyone in the kind of DJ world knows that when they started, they would fly to
Ibiza.
Well, not even. You would do the 400 quid gig in Dusseldorf because you were flattered to be invited. And does nothing for your career.
You get your name on a flyer somewhere.
Right. So there's a lot of, and that's true of bands as well. There is a lot of travel, often label kind of subsidised and pushed because they think, well, it's good to be doing something.
Yeah, right, of course.
It's not strategic. So I think thinking strategically, which also would save money,
it's interesting,
about what is valuable to the career of an artist.
Yeah.
And then from the festival side or touring side, it's also about, well, where do we want our ticket buyers to come from, and how do we change our marketing? How do we incentivise people from nearer to come?
It's, in some ways, a lot of marketing these days is done digitally, so you're not producing those posters that would be illegally put up around the UK or wherever, or the flyers, or there's a little bit less of that going on. But of course, as we just discussed, if everything goes onto these digital platforms and there are big server farms that are not powered environmentally effectively, then
and a few thousand flyers is
agreed.
Not a big, in the great scheme of things.
In the grand scheme of things, absolutely, and also highly recyclable normally. At least
it
depends on how they're made. I agree.
Yeah.
But very good. Okay, all right. So just be generally aware. I just wonder, that could be a new project for you, Alex, at Hubbub. Aim for something at the music industry.
We have talked about it.
Oh, you have?
I don't think we're going to do it, but because everyone in the office goes to festivals, is really into music, is really engaged and connected with that world.
Yeah.
And I'm not. So one of my co-directors was in a band signed to EMI and toured for a couple of years.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So there's a few kind of music links. So
country, right.
We have thought, but then that's not a good reason to do something.
Yeah. Yeah. No, sure. I agreed. It's a small industry, to be fair, but in terms of your impact as an organisation, it's probably better to look at the mass.
I think there are other people looking at it as well.
That's true.
So,
That's true. As you just mentioned, Judy's Bicycle. Good. Well, I'm done. Thank you so much. I hope the campaign is a success. I hope it really kind of hits home and makes people think. I mean, that's a lot of kind of what you guys are doing, just asking people to have a little think.
To have a think, but also to take action.
Sure.
That's the key.
Yeah, and actually the action that you sort of ask people to take isn't insurmountable. It's not hard. It's not. It's just often a small adjustment to kind of how they conduct themselves. Just making a change here, there, and everywhere. Really. Yeah, that's very good. Good. Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate your time. So to my listeners, thank you for listening. I welcome all feedback, comments, and suggestions for future shows. My Twitter handle is @AlexBranson. Just if I don't follow you already, put podcast DM in a message. I will follow you back and we'll have a direct dialogue. Or head to the website www.abcmusic.co, where you'll find a contacts page with my email address on. Thank you again.